आशु मीट में है. हेलो आशु, कैन यू हियर मी? So hello ma'am, uh, are we audible to you? ये नॉइस किस किस एंड से आ रही है? I heard myself. Yeah, there's some noise definitely. The background. I don't know what's the origination of it. Let's see. Hold on. Can I just change my audio input device? In the meantime, Bhavika, you just interact with ma'am and get the session started. Hello ma'am, are we audible to you? We can't hear you ma'am. Hello. Am I audible, Bhavika?
Yes, you're audible quite clearly now.
Finally. Yes. So I think there's some issue from ma'am's end. She is in the meet, but I don't know. She can't hear us or something. Let me message her. Yes. So I think there's some issue from ma'am's end. She is in the meet, but I don't know. I think there's some.
Hello, can you hear me now?
Yes, ma'am, you're audible.
We can hear
Okay,
you.
cool.
Yeah. So yeah, we'll then start the session. So uh, welcome you all to this second guest talk of our series Women in Robotics. Today we have with ourselves Louise Poubel. She is currently the simulation lead at Zipline, one of the leading startups in the field of delivery using drones for healthcare. She'll introduce it more herself only. Next, she was also the technical lead for Gazebo for more than 3 years. So yeah, the Gazebo that we all work in. So that's a short intro of her. So thanks a lot for agreeing to do this, ma'am.
Yeah, happy to be here. Thank you for the introduction.
Over to you, Bhavna.
So first of all, thank you so much, ma'am, for gracing us with your presence. It's a pleasure to have you here. So we'll start the session with some questions to make it more interactive so that we can know more about you and your work. So first of all, I would like to ask, could you please tell us about your journey from a child born in Brazil to a career in robotics in the US? How did you start in this field? Like you started off with a BS in electromechanical engineering. So how did this journey start?
Sure, yeah. Yeah, as you said, I was born in Brazil. I grew up in Brazil. When I was 18 and I was looking into getting into college, I saw actually an advertisement on the newspaper about a scholarship to go to study in Japan. So I thought like, what are the odds of this working out? But actually, like I took the test at the Japanese consulate and they chose me to give me a scholarship to go to Japan to do my undergrad. So I went to Japan. I had never left Brazil. I needed a passport. I didn't even have a passport at the time. So I went to Japan when I was 18 to study electromechanical engineering. Then it was also my first time speaking English. Like you guys are lucky that you can speak English and you can practice it, because I was only speaking Portuguese until that time. So it was a big shock for me to be in a new country, having to no one who spoke the language I was used to. And then after that, after 5 years in Japan, I got a scholarship to go study in Europe, where I got my master's in robotics. I first studied 1 year in Poland and then 1 year in France. In Japan, it was paid by the government. In Europe, it was paid by the government. And then after that, I started working with Open Robotics at my previous job, where I was an intern, a remote intern, kind of like how harsh was it a remote intern for us when I was at Open Robotics too. So I wasn't in the US. And then after being a remote intern, they hired me remotely to be a contractor. And then eventually they hired me to come to the US. And that's where I've been. So I was at Open Robotics for 9 years. And then like 6 months ago, I joined Zipline. That's the summary.
Yeah, that's truly great since you have traveled around so much in the world.
Yeah, it's been quite a journey so far.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I was thinking about this holding this session like for a very long time, like since like even before the GSOC also, like I think I saw you first in that YouTube series of this Red Hat or something about open source and all that. That was a really nice made series. So from that time I was thinking to call someone from the open source, because here like I'll just give a brief intro of our club and all. So here mostly like we are almost 150 students in the college who do stuff in robotics, and mostly most of us work in ROS and Gazebo. Like most of us, like almost everyone of the club had at some time used ROS and at some time used Gazebo. So definitely, like we all know the work and the ROS and Gazebo specifically. So to talk to someone, work with someone from the organization is definitely a great experience. So that's why a lot of enthusiasm from our club also today. So yeah, so moving on to, could you explain more on the work you did at Gazebo and now at the Zipline, some of your work?
Sure, yeah. So when I started as an intern in Gazebo, my intern project was to create a web UI for the simulator. So there was already a web UI so that you could run the simulator on either your local machine or a machine on the cloud. And then you could visualize the simulation and interact with it via your phone. So there was a web UI, but I did the mobile web UI. Actually, so it was like touch interaction, zooming in, zooming out, that kind of stuff. And then as I got the contract work, I did more work on the web UI for desktop as well. Started touching more of the simulator. And then when they eventually hired me, it was to work on the native simulator that was in C++. So until then, I had only done JavaScript. And then when I joined the company as a full-time employee, I started working on the simulator C++ code. From there, let's see, like some of the highlights, like I started doing a lot of graphical interface work. But since the team was small, we all had to do a lot. So I ended up touching all of the parts of the simulator, from the physics to the rendering to the transport layer. And then eventually I went from engineer to senior engineer. Then I became a supervisor and I started supervising people. And eventually I was promoted to team lead, and I led the team for over 3 years until 6 months ago. I decided that I needed to try something different with my career. Everything that I knew was Gazebo. Everything that I knew was ROS and Gazebo. And I wanted to make sure that I was exposed to different work environments, different technologies before it got too late and I was like too old and I couldn't, I was just set in my ways and I couldn't learn new things. So I started looking around, and Zipline really was really attractive to me because of the mission. It's a great place to work in. We are, it's a drone delivery company. So we have like these fixed wing little planes here that in reality, they are like 3 meters wide. So this wingspan here is 3 meters. So it's like bigger than a person. And they deliver like it started as healthcare products that were emergency ones, and this is still the bulk of the things that we deliver, but we are starting to quickly expand to other domains as well, mainly in Africa. We are in like at least 6 different African countries. We are in the US, in Japan, and rapidly expanding to several countries. We also have a lot of cool stuff coming on. Like we have this big announcement coming on next week that about like the latest thing that we've been working on, which is also very cool. So yeah, let me know if you guys have like any specific questions. I'm happy to elaborate a little bit more in any part of it.
Yeah, sure, ma'am. First, let's talk on the Gazebo thing. Like, you did your master's in robotics. So, like, how was this transition? Because when I worked in through GSOC and all, what I felt was there's a mixture of development and robotics. Like, it's not robotics that you do in masters or the robotics that kind of robotics we do. So how did that transition happen, and currently how is that? Okay.
Yeah, that's a good question. So for me, like I went from mechanical in my undergrad, then I did a master's in robotics where I did a little bit more coding, but it was still a lot of like, physics and kinematics, dynamics, that more robotics concepts. And then when I suddenly started working with Gazebo, it was an entire other world. It was software engineering, which I had never done before. And that has been my career ever since. Like nowadays, I'm a software engineer more than I am a robotics engineer. The robotics in the work that I've been doing is more like understanding the concepts, but not too much putting them in practice. So like I'm not writing, for example, at Zipline, I'm not writing the algorithms that make the drones fly themselves and that makes them coordinate with each other, right? All these things are more robotics concepts, right? My team is the simulation team, and we're writing tools like, the physics, the graphical interfaces, the command line tools, the APIs that people are going to use to be able to work on their robotic stuff. So it's important for me and my team to understand robotics, but not so much to be doing the robotics. This is the same when I was doing Gazebo, right? Like the bulk of the work is pure software engineering. Like even someone who doesn't understand robots should be able to contribute significantly. The robotics just comes as like, oh, you have to remember that this is going to be used for robotics so that you can, better address that use case. But that's not the knowledge that you're using every day.
Sure. 1 second, just like you can ask for the audience, you can ask your questions in between also. If we find it interesting, we'll definitely convey. And at the end, we'll have 10-15 minutes of question rounds for you. And also, if you can't access the chat, I have given the MS team joining link. If you join using that team link, you should access the chat. So, yeah. So moving back to say, so So how is like this transition from like Gazebo to Zipline working, like from open source working 9 years in open source to non-open source, and like how is this work different in Zipline?
Yeah, it's still a transition. I'm still adapting to it. And so, like, to explain a little bit this stack, like, I went from a career of working, every single line of code that I wrote at Open Robotics was public, pretty much. There was like a couple of projects here and there that we kept like in private repositories, but like most of my work had been public, and that's what I'm used to. But then when I went to Zipline, like the stack at Zipline is completely proprietary and custom. It's all done in house. From we design the drones, we manufacture them, and then we operate the centers, the distribution center. So every single thing is done in house. And at first, I'm still adapting to it. I can see some advantages and some disadvantages to it. We do have a large team that can take care of the tools, and it's nice to be flexible and be able to change things to cater exactly to our use case. On the flip side, whenever we hire someone, it takes them so long to learn our tools and figure them out, because nobody comes from school knowing that, right? Which is different from Open Robotics. Whenever we hired someone at Open Robotics, they would already come in knowing ROS and Gazebo, so they could like just jump in and be productive. But at Zipline, like even our most like basic tools are things that people have to learn. And like to add to that, like things are not well documented, right? Like the priority of the company is not making the software look nice, because nobody else is seeing the software, which is very different from Gazebo. Like I was developing in front of the entire world. Everybody could see what I was doing. But now with proprietary software, it's like, well, there's no open source community checking in and kind of like poking at your software and pointing out the problems. So it's easier to let things slip and to do things a little bit more rushed. Because the goal is not to write beautiful software. The goal is to serve our customers and make those deliveries and really make an impact in the world. So it's interesting. It's an interesting transition.
So you are working on the simulation side of Zipline. So the whole simulation and everything is proprietary, like the simulator and all everything.
Everything is custom in-house. It's very different from Gazebo. This is another thing that I'm still like wrapping my head around. For example, the first thing that I was shocked when I got into the company, they already had a simulator, and the simulator doesn't have any visualization. You just run and you see a wall of text, and you believe that the drones are doing what you told them to do, which for me was shocking. I was just like, what? I'm so used to Gazebo, just opening the graphical interface and seeing what's going on. But now I understand that like their focus has been on other things. And my team now that was formed to take care of the simulation is working on developing like improving these tools and improving how the experience for users, so that they can have a similar experience to Gazebo, because our simulator right now is very precise. It can simulate like down to each individual motor on the drone, each individual battery, but it doesn't have a lot of the nice tools that you would expect if you're coming from Gazebo, like for debugging, for introspecting the user interface, and so on.
So last question on this, like how are this like companies that are working like mostly now, I won't say Zipline is a startup now, but still like kind of extended startups in robotics, like how is the field like in general comments on commercial robotics as of now, like
sorry, I don't get the question.
How is the field now for commercial robotics? Like it's like since software development, we clearly have big companies recruiting people, there's money flowing. So how is the scene in commercial robotics basically at this point?
Well, I don't know if you guys are following like what's happening here in the Silicon Valley in the US, but like a lot of companies are laying off workers and across technology, so that robotics companies are included. So it is a tough time for several companies. I've heard of several robotics companies, self-driving car companies, just laying off a large portion of their workforce. So from that perspective, I think everything is a little bit tense right now. I can speak for Zipline that we are in a very good place, and we are expanding, and we have like exciting things coming up. I've heard of some other companies that like either completely went under or significantly reduced their workforce. So yeah, I think for the next year or so, it's going to be a tough space in not only robotics, but in software in general. But like, it's going to be interesting to see, like, just Google laid off 12,000 people here in the Silicon Valley. So like, these people are very smart people who, have a ton of experience, and I'm sure that they're just gonna like get together and come up like with new companies, new ideas, new projects. So it's gonna be interesting to see like the landscape is gonna be like 3 years from now.
Sure, ma'am. Bhavika.
So, ma'am, I just wanted to ask you something about your projects. Can you please tell us about a project which you have worked on and you're particularly proud of?
Particularly proud of. So when I was at Open Robotics, it was like in my early years. I think I had been there for like just 3 years or something. And they were kind enough to trust me to design the competition for the NASA Space Robotics Challenge. So that was a virtual competition hosted by NASA with a humanoid robot on Mars. And teams had to perform several tasks inside that environment with a humanoid robot, and my task was to design the entire world and game logic for that. So in the end, that was like, I think it was the first big project that they trusted me with, and I think that the result was really nice. The competition went through. We had like a competitive environment for the competitors. So like we had one team that was able to complete all of the checkpoints, and all of the other teams kind of like did less than that, which is perfect for a competition. One concern with the competition is that everybody gets everything right, and then you don't have a way to tell who won, or that nobody can finish the competition. That was our biggest worry, that it was too difficult and nobody was going to be able to finish. So I was very involved in designing the tasks, tweaking the difficulty, making sure that like things wouldn't explode inside Gazebo when people were trying to do things. And the result was very nice.
Yeah, ma'am, that it indeed sounds very interesting. So, like, what are your long-term career goals in this field? And what do you hope to achieve in the years to come?
That's a good question. I haven't stopped to think about it for the past 6 months, since I've been so like trying to adapt to a new workplace. In the long term, like I really care about impact and doing something that is nice for the world. So I really think that in that sense, Zipline was a good fit, and I plan to stay around for a very long time and grow in the company. It is a big company, so there's plenty of opportunity for growth. I'm growing my team right now. That there's like the faith that Zipline is putting in simulation is very big, and a lot of our projects depend on it, which is very cool. For example, like we are not just simulating the drone, we're simulating like I said, down to each individual component, but also like up to an entire city and a distribution operation. And the simulator is very flexible, so that you can like have very low fidelity drones with high fidelity drones. So it's a very interesting challenge, and a lot of people in the entire company depend on us, like from business people who are making decisions of how many drones should we have in an operation center at a given time of day, right? Like they use simulation to answer these questions, all the way to like, how are we training our operators? They that like right now we train our operators in the physical distribution centers, but like we're gonna create a simulation environment where they can see the drones flying and they can send commands, and we can craft dangerous situations that are rare to see in the real world. And we're using simulations to convince authorities that our drones are safe so that we can get permission to fly. So for example, we're running like hundreds of thousands of simulations. It's incredible. You press a button and our CI kicks off like 200,000 simulations in parallel with like random configurations of the world to make sure that the drone behaves properly in all of them. So it's way more than simulation just used for daily development. It's really a core part of a lot of things that we do in the company. So this is what I'm very excited about right now. Like this simulation beyond just a development tool for the autonomy team, but as a tool for the company to grow and to make plans and to train people and so much more. For the next like 3 years and beyond, I really plan to be expanding my team, growing with Zipline. Zipline itself as a company is doing a bunch of exciting things for the next couple of years. So it's gonna be fun to be there for the journey.
Yes, ma'am. Hoping to see a lot more interesting projects from Zipline. Over to Harsh.
Yeah, so like what you talked about, just like making an impact and companies like this expanding. So it would be very interesting to know, what do you see a world expanding in, like whatever your worldview is for 10 years, 20 years or 30 years from now, because we see so much buzz around machine learning, AI, and so much buzz around robotics. So do you see robots bringing in our lives and machine learning in our lives? So what do you think about future?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think that like the entire world was shaken by ChatGPT in the recent weeks, right? And everybody's rethinking about, what is our role like as software engineers, as companies that develop and sell software. What is our role in a world where you have like such a tool that can help you so much? I don't know if you guys have been using it much. I really recommend it, because the people who don't use it are gonna be staying behind.
Okay, so the questions asked to you, they have been tweaked by ChatGPT. Also, the poster and the messages that we send for this event are by ChatGPT. So definitely we have it around.
Yeah, see?
Yes, ma'am. It's quite interesting to use it, and it seemed fascinating at first.
Like, beyond fascinating, like it's so useful after a point. Like I was applying for programs this time, like this summer, and like all my SOPs and LORs, like earlier I used to write, then came Grammarly. So I write, then it goes to Grammarly. Now I write, it goes to Grammarly, then it goes to ChatGPT, then it goes back to Grammarly, and then I post it. Like it's barely my text.
It's amazing. It's like, like 2 decades ago, people learning how to use like Microsoft Word, right? Like instead of writing things by hand, it's the people who don't learn are just going to stay behind. Yeah.
Still, like, do you see like robots, like, okay, AI ML is something I see definitely impacting our lives coming days, but do you see robotics as we see it impact in our lives in like 2040, 2050, whatever, like physical robots making an impact?
Yeah, so like, I think that like the possibilities that this kind of AI change are going to unlock are going to be huge for robotics and for anything that involves automation, right? So, like self-driving car companies have made tremendous progress in the past. Like now here in California, we have a couple of self-driving car companies actually like running cars without a driver already under, very, very strict circumstances. So I think that like it's, 2040, to 20 years from now, it's gonna be commonplace to see like self-driving cars in multiple places in the world. For other things like robots in the home, right? Like we already have the Roombas. I only think that that's gonna increase. Factories are also going to be impacted. One thing that like, for being at Zipline, I'm very in touch with is like flying drones and delivery. And I really think that this is going to be like very commonplace in the future. At least that's what we're hoping for. So it's like it's gonna be exciting when you have, you know, like imagine the way that the world's gonna change when you can just order something and have it like dropping from the sky in 10 minutes. This is already reality in the places where we operate. So it's gonna be world changing for sure. And I can see like different industries kind of going the same route of like really speeding up people's lives, making lives easier. Yeah.
Also on the simulation side, because you work in simulator, like what are your views on technologies like this metaverse or something of this, like simulator kind of realities, simulated realities? Do you think uh, they are real enough already, or it's a long way to go?
Interesting. I haven't seen anything about the metaverse. Like for me, yeah, it's being on my like, you know, I hear, like, I know it exists, but I've never touched it. I've never seen it, how it works. You know, it feels like a video game to me. Like, and not, I think when the pandemic happened, people thought that like everybody was going to enjoy staying at home. And now that the pandemic's gone and people are back to their normal lives, like these virtual worlds are not as you know, as desired as people originally thought. Like, I think this is a big part of like Facebook was the first one to have a ton of layoffs here in the Silicon Valley, and everybody's saying like this was one of the reasons they banked a lot on having like, you know, the metaverse and these virtual worlds, and it just didn't pay off. It's people want to meet face to face. So personally, I'm not very convinced that this is, you know, this is always going to be like a niche thing that some people do, but like it's never going to, you know, impact the world like, you know, like an Amazon that delivers packages for lots of folks, or like, you know, self-driving cars that are going to be driving people all around. And like, I don't see the metaverse being something that impacts every single person's lives. We'll see.
Yeah, interesting. Like what you say, I completely resonate with it. But sometimes when I interact with 10 years less older, like kids who are 9, 10, 11, 12 now, like I still feel like a bit of a difference they have on this one, like definitely, because for them video games are not just video games after a point. Like they spend a lot, like they interact in video games, also social interaction, and like they have friends and all, everyone. So they people who have not met for like years and they are friends for years. So definitely I think this one is interesting to see.
Yeah, that's a good point. You know, like I am getting old. Eventually I'm not gonna keep up with the latest things. Like I have an almost 2-year-old daughter, and she's just starting to interact with technology, and just seeing her like, you know, easily interacting with phones and tablets, and like to think that these things didn't exist when I was her age, it's mind blowing. So it's, yeah, maybe, you know, like the kids will know the future.
Sure. Also, like next question is about impact. Like you talked about impact and like impact. Like I read about you and a lot of where I saw that robotics for good and you robotics for impact and all. So like one thing, like when I think about these things that comes to my mind is like automation in itself. Is it good for the society or is it not? Because like what practically I see it doing is like okay, zipline is a clear thing that it is delivering medicines, then okay, it is a good initiative. But at the same time, when you see robots replace humans in suppose a mall, so what it is practically doing, it is saving cost for the mall owner, but it is also creating in unemployment amongst the poor. So it is kind of increasing the wealth inequality. Technology in itself is kind of increasing the wealth inequality. So what do you think about, like, are we making a positive impact, like always, like?
Yeah, no, that's a great question. And like, you know, I'm not a social
Think
I say is that like I think everybody can agree that there are jobs that humans shouldn't be doing. You know, humans are doing because dangerous like physically that they can get hurt, or dangerous like that they can get contaminated with something. And these are the best perfect places to put robots in, like factories. Also like doing repetitive work, anything that a robot could be doing and a human is doing, it's mainly because our society is not well organized, right? Like, so I don't think it's so much the society's fault. It's more about not the technology's fault. It's more about like how society is organized. And I think that if we start having like a lot of changes in that aspect in the next decade or two, society is going to have to adapt, because the way that we organize, the way that like money passes around, the way that like people acquire goods and are even like able to get the things necessary for life. We shouldn't be forcing people to work on bad conditions if we can have a robot doing that instead. So I really think that this is going to be a forcing function for society, technology, and we can't avoid it. It's not like we're going to say, oh no, don't develop that technology. It's going to be developed, right? One thing that I want to say about robots being good or bad is like, one thing that always bothered me working on open source is that people could use ROS and Gazebo for things that I personally didn't agree with, which was always something that was in my mind. Like, am I helping the world if I'm if someone goes and makes like a killer drone or a killer robot with ROS and uses Gazebo to simulate it? Like, am I responsible for that? And this was always something that bothered me, and something that gives me a little bit more like peace of mind now that I'm working on a software stack that is all proprietary and internal to the company, because I know that like, the simulator that we're doing cannot be used for things that I don't agree with, which is very nice. But yeah, it is hard in robotics to find like the companies that have a good mission. I think that there's a lot of cool stuff happening in agricultural robots. Some of it is displacing jobs for sure, but it is displacing jobs that are tough, and that like growing food is a good thing for everyone, right? Like we need more food in the world. So I think that's a good industry. Drone delivery of medical products is a nice industry. But yeah, there's a bunch of things in robotics that don't feel as good for the world, unfortunately.
Sure, ma'am. That was something interesting. Also, like, how do you think open source fits in all of this? Like, how important is it, and what is the role of open source, do you think, in all this?
Yeah, this is something that I've been a little bit conflicted about, because of what I just said, that like, when you're doing open source, you can't tell people how to use the technology, so they may use it for bad things. But it's undeniable that like it has a positive impact on access, right? Like people who would otherwise not have money to pay for a license to use some software now can have access to it. It also like makes the entire field work faster, because like several companies are collaborating and they are not reinventing the wheel every time. So like the companies that are contributing to ROS2 right now, they are collaborating and moving faster into this common framework, and there wouldn't be an easier way of doing it if it was an open source. So I really think that open source is good from that perspective. And for like the individual developers, open source is awesome. Like a lot of my career, I have to be thankful for the fact that I was able to do open source work, and I have like a portfolio of work that's public that I can show. Today I'm in the position of interviewing people from, to hire for my team. And like, unfortunately, one thing that we see a lot from people who don't work with open source is that like they really can't tell much about what they're doing, and it's like they're very experts in something that nobody else is using, and then those skills don't transfer. So for individuals working on open source and using open source is also very valuable, because you're more valuable in the market to more people who are using those tools.
Also, like, the speeding up, like the impact open source has, like mostly like I tell like people who have not made a physical robot of a large scale would not know the impact how easy it would be with ROS and Gazebo, or writing Python code on your itself as like as a developer of like first year, second year, or like a school student. It is like really like impossible if it was not for like softwares like this. So yeah, definitely. Also like in our college also like we have some open source culture, like definitely. So any advice for people getting started in open source, or like mostly in our college people start with GSOC only. It's like a bit of a trend, like okay, like we have the highest number of GSOCs in the world for like 2-3 years
Oh,
now.
really?
So yeah, so the people mostly start with GSOC only. So any advice for people start getting started in open source and finding organizations that they like and all that?
Yeah. I think each organization is different, but yeah, I would recommend, like, if you're looking for a project to contribute to and to learn more about, really go with something that like you care about and you deeply think is interesting for you. Like, and that's for not only for open source but everything in life, right? Like, if you really like what you're doing, you tend to do a better job. So look for those kinds of things, and then like to get started with anything, you have to just try to use it and try to do something interesting with it, right? Like, some people just get into a big code base and get overwhelmed and don't know where to start. I always say, like, start with a little project. What is this useful for? Then what can you do with it? And as you expand your portfolio of different projects and expand your horizons, you start learning more about the technology. So, for example, with Gazebo, if you want to be a contributor to Gazebo, first you have to be a user, right? Like, you can't skip knowing how to use it if you want to develop it. So create a few simulations, run a few projects, try to create something custom. There's a custom plugin interface. There's, like, you can create custom models to load into the simulator. And then as you're doing this, you may observe, oh, there's this little thing that bothers me that doesn't work the way I want, or I ran into a bug. And then you can start investigating how to fix that. Then you have more motivation, then you have more understanding. It's better than just going like, oh, I want to contribute to this project. Let's look through the issue list and find a nice issue for me to target, because then it's overwhelming, right? I'm not saying you're not going to be able to find something that is a good fit for you, but it's more like, yeah, it can be more complicated. These are my tips.
Sure, ma'am. Thanks a lot. Bhavika, you can continue.
Yes, ma'am. Moving from the topics from AI and robotics, let's move on to your experience as a woman in robotics. So, I just wanted to ask, what are some challenges that you might have faced as a female in the robotics industry, and how have you overcome them?
Yeah, it's complicated to pinpoint things like this, because a lot of the ways in which it manifests are subtle, and it's like not like people are obviously like just saying things to your face very obviously, but like from time to time you hear that, like, oh, you're like, I went to a conference once, and I was talking to someone who was like in the, just like having a coffee or something, and he asked me like, oh, so you're here with your boyfriend? And I'm like, what? Like, no, I'm here because, like, I'm interested in the technology. So you hear these things here and there, and it makes you question, right? Like, am I in the right place? Like, or just don't feel like you're a part of it, right? And that is little, right? Like, that is not enough to make anyone stop, but it adds up. And like, if you have to deal with this your entire life, it's tough, right? So I've had my fair share of things like that. Like, right now I'm interviewing people for my team, right? And I do feel with like some male candidates that like they have this little like thing of like, oh, you're a woman, like, would I work for you? So there are little things here and there. One thing to say is that, like, at least the world is going in a good direction, and it's being more inclusive. Companies are really trying to be inclusive and increase diversity in several axes, not only like for women, but also like for minorities of all sorts of kinds. So it's very, the future is promising. And I think the landscape is much different from when I started robotics. I remember, I don't know if you guys follow, there is this list of like 50 women in robotics, I think now it is, that is published every year. 50 women in robotics that you should know. I remember I was in the list, like in the third, fourth list when it was still 15 women in robotics, like many years ago. And when I came out on that list, I was still like pretty junior in my career. And I was like, that was shocking to me. That was like, oh my God, like, what does it mean that I'm in this list? I haven't done anything meaningful. Does that mean that there is no other women? Like that, they have to put a junior developer there? I was just shocked. I was like, oh my God, we need more women. And nowadays, like the list is so big, every year they add more women, and it's much more competitive to get into the list. So I think it's a good sign that the list is, that there's more women. Like now I work with women in Zipline. Like I see myself sometimes in a meeting with just like 4 women, and no men, which is like new in my career. This has never happened. It's not like we forced ourselves to be 4 women. It's just like we were the right people to be there to make the decisions and talk about the technology at that time. So the future is promising.
Yes, ma'am, I totally relate, as we are also engineering students in our college, and we can see the male to female ratio here as well. But it's actually quite good that in the robotics club as well in our college, the representation has been increasing from year to year, and it's quite a nice place right now. So
Nice.
moving on to the next question, I just wanted to ask, as you started collaborating with OSRF as an intern through the first outreach program for women, how did this opportunity help you with your career, and what are your views on such outreach programs?
Oh, that was life-changing. I mean, like, I don't know where I would be today if it hadn't been that. I think that this kind of opportunity is really, you know, unlocking a lot of potential for a lot of people. Like at Open Robotics, we started the scholarship for people to attend ROSCON every year, the diversity scholarship. That every year we are sending more people to ROSCON, and it's amazing to see. To follow those folks who 5 years ago were in the scholarship, and today to see that like they are working for big companies, they made a bunch of connections. They how much that helped in their career. And the same thing is for me. Like I got my foot into Silicon Valley because of that project. I don't think it would have been easy otherwise. The fact that I could work remotely is a big one, because it is very hard for people to work remotely. Like strong people that I know that are like in other countries in South America, Europe, are having a hard time to work for big companies, because or like for companies that are doing like an impact that they care about, just because it's hard for companies to hire internationally. So having that opportunity to do an internship with an impactful company was really life-changing, and not only for me, but for a bunch of other women and other minorities too.
Yes, ma'am. I can understand. As there's also quite a fuss around such programs in our college as well. But I think we could learn from you that such opportunities actually provide a great platform for the development and your further career.
Yeah.
Yes, ma'am. So next up, I would like to ask, what are your advices that you will give to young women who are interested in pursuing the career in robotics, who might be facing some similar challenges?
I would say don't let things get to you. It's focus on, if you're interested in the technology, if you're interested in what you're doing, focus on that and just be good at it, and that's it. Like you don't have to prove anything to anyone. One thing that I didn't mention is that like when you're in a position where a lot of people are doubting you that you even fit in, there is a lot of like putting it upon yourself to be better than everybody else, to prove them that you're even worthy to be there. So there's a lot of imposter syndrome, right? Like I don't belong here. I really have to try harder than everybody else. And that can be really tiring, and like people can get burnout, you know. So I would say, like, don't be hard on yourself. Like, try to be as objective as you can. See what your male colleagues are doing and what the women around you are doing, and ask yourself, like, you know, are we different, or like, do I really belong here for my technical skills? You know, like, just focus on that. I know it's hard though, but yeah, that's my recommendation. Like, just don't let things get to you.
Yes, ma'am. Thank you so much for that. Over to Harsh.
Yeah, thanks a lot, ma'am. Now we can take 10-15 minutes question from chat if there are any. So yeah, you can just post your questions on chat, or you can raise your hands and unmute and talk. We also have few people in YouTube, so I'll just check YouTube's chat. So, yeah, if anyone has any questions for ma'am, so they can ask in the chat. So, I don't think there are much questions. So thanks a lot, ma'am, for like taking your time out and coming here and talking to us. So yeah, that's it from our side. If you want to say any final words.
Yeah, well, this was fun. Thank you so much for the opportunity and the invitation. I'm cheering for all of you. I'm sure you're all gonna do awesome things in your career. We're probably gonna run into each other in the robotics world. So yeah,
Sure.
happy to be here.
Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am. Thank you so much. Goodbye.